Okay, so tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in the physical therapy realm disability community. What motivated you to become a physical therapist?
Absolutely. So for everyone out there, my name is Megan Miles. I'm a PT, and I've been a PT for 8 years now. I grew up in the Dallas area, did my physical therapy school in Arkansas, but ended up back in Texas as to start my career, and I've been here ever since. I started my career as a PT at the same hospital that I worked at as a student, and I've never left. I've loved it so much. And I work in the inpatient rehab department. Even though I still do my clinical work over there, in the last couple of years, I've transitioned into the academic side. So I now have the opportunity to teach PT students, but not only PT students, but also PTs who are in their neuro residency program. So I kind of have the best world. I have clinic work where I get to help patients, but I also get to teach the future PTs of America. So it's pretty great. When I started looking at the profession and like starting my career, I wanted something for sure that I was excited about and something that was going to give me a lifelong passion of just showing up to work and feeling really good about work. And so when I started to narrow down what I thought would be that lifelong passion for me, there was a couple of things that I knew for sure. So I knew that I wanted to be able to serve people. I knew that I love the human body, and it's pretty amazing on what the human body can do and move and all of those things. And then movement was really important to me. So the ability to incorporate movement, mobility, whatever it looks like, into a job. And when looking at all those three things, physical therapy kind of was the best fit, the perfect fit to match those things. And I've been very, very happy with my career choice.
hmm My next question is, what sorts of things do you do in inpatient rehab?
Yeah. So, from looking at a very broad perspective, the goal of inpatient rehab is really to provide the training, the resources, and tools to individuals to make it home safely. So, the end goal is to make it home, but not only to make it home, but do it safely. And so, a lot of times we end up practicing things that you face at home. So, a lot of functional tasks that ends up being like helping someone get out of bed, someone to get up and down the stairs, even up off the floor. We go through that. So, it ends up being all of those functional things. But knowing that that's not the only aspect of physical therapy and inpatient rehab, I end up doing a lot of walking training on top of that. I see a lot of individuals with neurological conditions, so very acute neurological conditions. So that's someone maybe immediately after a stroke or someone who's gone through a brain surgery for a tumor removal. And a lot of these individuals end up needing like higher intensity activities. And we end up doing that through high intensity gait training on the treadmill system that we have. The idea is in these really acute conditions, we give them this high intensity to promote brain changes. And working at these higher level activities helps almost trickle down to some of the easier things, like getting out of bed or the lower complex movements. So it's a pretty big span of things that we end up doing in inpatient rehab across the board.
hmm My next question is, you also help with you also work with OTs, PTs, and SLPs. What's that all about? What sorts of things do you do in that regard?
Yeah, definitely. So as I mentioned earlier, inpatient rehab is really the big goal is to get someone home and home successfully. And PT is just a small sliver of helping someone get home successfully. We do understand that there's so many other aspects of the individual's day to make it successful. So those are things that the OT and the speech therapist focus on. So those are things like figuring out the best transfer to get in and out of the shower or on and off the toilet. And then in addition to that, our speech therapists, they do a wide variety of treatment too, but sometimes we end up co-treating with our OTs and speech therapists to really implement all the things that we're learning together to best fit this individual going home.
hmm My next question, I have a follow-up question on that front. What do you do from an inpatient rehab perspective to make sure that individuals have that independence and freedom that they need in their life?
Oh yeah, definitely. So as you can imagine, everyone presents just a little bit differently. Everyone is different in how they move, what kind of weaknesses or strengths that they have. And so we have to analyze and figure out kind of what's best on an individual basis. So it ends up being really a process of trial and error. So we work through different ways and with different equipment to see what works best for the individual. So that may be in terms of like trialing different transfers. Maybe standing's not going so good because you tuck her out really quickly. So we maybe switch to a seated transfer, and going from a standing transfer to a seated transfer makes all the difference on whether someone needs help or not needs help, you know? And then we go over things like maybe switching up devices that they get around with, or just trialing new things. So maybe someone just needs a little more support from a device like a different kind of walker, a different kind of seating device that gives them the support where they need. And so they can do things more on their own versus relying on someone else.
Hmm. My next question is, what impact does physical therapy, specifically inpatient rehab, have on the disability community? You know, what sorts of stories have you heard from patients that you've worked with, family
Oh, yeah.
members?
Yeah, definitely. So I didn't realize how much of an impact until just recently, honestly. We all think kind of we're just in a blip in the continuum of care, but what we can help provide on an inpatient rehab basis can hopefully provide success in the future. So one story that comes in mind, I had the opportunity to participate in a community support group for patients and caregivers like post-stroke, and they were individuals who had come through our inpatient rehab and now had transitioned out into the community, and some were still doing therapy, some people weren't. But in this support group, the PT residents were that I work alongside were giving a presentation on community resources for continued exercise or different programs out in the community that they could access just to have additional room of support and just physical well-being still, so continued exercise. And so through this community support group, we were giving this information, and one of the individuals had mentioned specifically, he's like, oh man, I wish my inpatient rehab therapist had given me this. This would have been so helpful for me to get exercising a little bit sooner after my therapy. I think all of your therapists should know about all these different groups and exercise programs that are out there, because that will help their patients in the future. So even though we're very kind of one sliver of the whole continuum of the healing process, therapists on the inpatient rehab side, knowing what's available out there, can only set their patients up for success in the future by giving them those resources.
Hmm. My last question is, how can inpatient rehab create better outcomes for people with disabilities in the long run?
Absolutely. I think there's a couple of different things that come into mind for me. And I'm going to speak on terms of like neurospecific, because that's what my specialty is, and then also just what I traditionally see in the inpatient rehab setting. And I'm thinking in more acute conditions. So someone who's, like I had mentioned before, just immediately after stroke or brain surgery, whatever the case may be. But a lot of times the research supports high intensity training very early on in these individuals. So having the opportunity to move and get volume of movement to promote good brain changes. So one of the best things that we can do for inpatient rehab is just get our patients moving, but not only moving, but moving well, trying to develop and structure our interventions that promote kind of the best kind of moving at the highest kind of volume. You're going to get so much more brain changes by doing, walking on the treadmill for 10 minutes in a very, great kind of way versus walking over ground for 25 feet. You know what I mean? And so structuring interventions that promote the most movement. But in addition to that, just being an educator and a resource for the individuals. There's a lot of things that are changing for individuals that are in the hospital. Their whole lives may be, flipped upside down, and the individual themselves may not have a medical background or know what's going on to their body or what's going on with them. So I think being the educator and talking through the body changes, how you're moving differently, kind of what's happening now, what to anticipate next, how you should be exercising to stay healthy in the future can have a huge impact on individuals after their rehab stay.
Cool.